This slide is showing the sarcomere, and it's showing the components of a sarcomere. Often when we talk about body systems, we talk about what is the functional unit of a system, and the functional unit of muscles is the sarcomere. Sarcomeres, remember, are found in myofibrils, and what coats the myofibril is a modified endoplasmic reticulum called the sarcoplasmic reticulum. And in terms of muscles, what's important about this is the source of calcium. And this makes a little more sense when we study nerves coming up, but you got to start somewhere. So calcium comes from the sarcoplasmic reticulum, which is kind of like the analogy is a sweater with holes in it that covers these myofibrils. And when a nerve impulse stimulates that, calcium is released. And for a muscle to contract, it needs ATP and it needs calcium. The calcium binds to the troponin. If you look on the right of the slide, there's two main molecules that make up a sarcomere. The actin, which is the thin filament, and the thin filament has something called tropomyosin, which is a ribbon that wraps around it, and a globular structure called troponin. Troponin has three binding sites, one for tropomyosin, one for calcium, and one binds to actin. So more on that later on the next slide. The myosin molecule, as you can see, is kind of like golf clubs, two golf club heads wound around each other. And the thick filament is made of several of those. So you'll see that a thick filament has several of those little golf club heads sticking around it. If you look at the sarcomere, there's lots of detail there with little letters and labels, and really the only one to remember are the Z lines. The Z lines, as you go from Z line to Z line, that is the boundary of the sarcomere. And by the Z lines is where it's lighter in color if you were to look at this under the microscope. And when a muscle is contracted, what happens is the myosin heads, as you'll see in the next slide, will grab onto actin and slide them together. It's the sliding filament theory of how muscles contract, and it'll make the lighter colored bands near the Z lines darker. So if IB gives you a picture of contracted versus relaxed muscles, the contracted always look darker near the Z lines and they look lighter when it's relaxed.